Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're tackling one of the most profound and honestly most challenging dilemmas in all of macroeconomics. How do we actually achieve fairness in a society? Every government on Earth has to figure out how to balance economic growth with the moral and practical necessity of giving its citizens a fair shot. It's a massive balancing act, and the stakes could not be higher. Before we go any further, just think about your own wallet for a second. Think about your paycheck, where the taxes taken out of it every single month. How much of that is determined by a government trying to balance the scales? You see, this is a deeply personal issue. It's just disguised as macroeconomic policy.
To show you just how high those stakes really are, imagine waking up one day, reaching into your wallet, and finding out that your biggest cash notes are suddenly worthless, like literally no longer legal tender. Well, in 2016, the Indian government made a massive surprise move and withdrew all 500 and 1,000 rupee notes from circulation overnight. We're talking about billions of individual notes, about 86% of the country's cash rendered absolutely useless in an instant. Why? Because at the time, just 2.5% of the population was paying income tax. This radical move, known as demonetization, was designed to force hoarded, untaxed wealth out of the shadows and straight into the taxable economy. It proves immediately that taxation, equity, and wealth redistribution aren't just abstract textbook concepts. They're high-stakes, real-world events that can impact millions of lives literally overnight.
Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for today. First, equity versus equality. Second, the efficiency trade-off. Third, absolute and relative poverty. And fourth, policies for income redistribution.
All right, Section 1, Equity versus Equality.
Right off the bat, we need to dispel a very common myth. People use these two words interchangeably all the time, but in economics, they mean very different things. Equality is about treating everyone in the exact same way. And sure, that sounds great in theory. But equality only really promotes fairness if everyone is starting from the exact same position and needs the exact same help. Think about it. If one person is starting life with inherited wealth and a great education, and another person is starting from absolute zero, treating them equally under the tax law doesn't actually make things fair, right? The person starting from zero is still utterly disadvantaged. Equity, on the other hand, happens when a society distributes its resources fairly based on people's actual circumstances. Equity focuses on fairness in the real-world distribution of income, benefits, and wealth. Take a moment to reflect on your own society. Does your tax system treat everyone exactly the same, or does it try to balance the scales based on who actually has more resources?
Let's break equity down a bit further, because economists actually look at two distinct aspects here. First, there's horizontal equity. This just means that folks with the exact same circumstances should pay the exact same level of taxation. If you and I earn the same amount and have the same number of dependents, we pay the same tax. Make sense? Vertical equity, however, is where it gets interesting. This means that tax should be fairly apportioned between the rich and the poor. Those with a greater ability to pay should absolutely contribute a larger share. This is the exact metric governments use when designing tax brackets, figuring out how much the top earners should pay compared to the middle and lower classes. It's literally the foundation of how we measure fairness in the tax code.
Moving right along to Section 2, the efficiency trade-off.
Achieving all this fairness is not easy because economics is fundamentally a social science of really tough compromises. There's a constant, deep friction between economic efficiency and what we call government failure. Efficiency is all about using scarce resources to produce maximum output at the lowest possible cost. Simple enough. But sometimes, when governments intervene purely to maximize efficiency, they cause a government failure, which is when a policy accidentally increases inequality. A classic example is a flat road pricing charge to stop traffic congestion. Now, it's highly efficient at clearing the roads, but it acts as a regressive tax. A person on a low wage driving to work pays the exact same flat charge as a highly paid executive. While the executive won't even notice the fee, that flat charge takes a massive, painful bite out of the low-wage worker's daily income. The poor worker is punished much more heavily relative to their earnings, meaning that an efficient policy has directly fueled inequality.
Which brings us to Section 3, Absolute and Relative Poverty. Now, what's really interesting and honestly quite horrifying about this next slide is the number itself, $1.90. This single glaring number is the international extreme poverty line defined by the World Bank. Imagine trying to secure food, water, housing, healthcare, and education for a whole day on less than $1.90. It's a sobering metric. For hundreds of millions of people globally, this isn't just a data point on a chart, it is the brutal daily reality of extreme poverty.
But the geography of this poverty is shifting dramatically. Now, extreme poverty has actually halved over the past 20 years, which is a huge win for humanity, thanks largely to massive economic growth in places like China, India, and Indonesia. But the biggest challenge now is concentration. By the year 2030, the world's poorest populations are forecast to be heavily concentrated in sub-Saharan Africa. This gives profound geographical weight to the data. It shows us exactly where entirely new types of global interventions are needed the most, because the old methods of global economic growth are simply no longer reaching the people being left behind in these hyper-concentrated regions.
It's really important we distinguish between the two main types of poverty that economists track. Absolute poverty is that measure of sheer survival, when a household's income is so incredibly low that it is utterly impossible to meet basic life needs like food, clean water, and decent housing. Relative poverty, though, is a bit different. It compares a household's income with the average income for their specific country. Typically, if a household earns less than 50% of the national average, they're in relative poverty. They might be able to afford basic survival needs, and someone in relative poverty in a rich country might even own a smartphone or a TV. But they cannot afford the standard quality of life or the access to higher education that the rest of their society enjoys. They are effectively locked out of the upward mobility that their peers just take for granted.
And this brilliantly illustrates what absolute poverty actually looks like on the ground. Think about a water tanker delivering to residents in Karachi, Pakistan. In many major cities in the global south, almost half of all households do not have access to piped water. So what do? They have to buy it from private, profit-driven vendors. In Karachi, a tanker truck of private water is 29 times more expensive than piped water. 29 times. Let that sink in. The poorest residents, who are already struggling to survive on meager incomes, face the horrific injustice of paying 29 times more just to access the most basic necessity for human survival.
So, how do we fix this? Let's explore that in Section 4, Policies for Income Redistribution.
What are the real-world policy solutions governments actually implement to correct these massive imbalances? Broadly speaking, there are 4 primary fiscal approaches. We've got means-tested benefits, universal basic income, or UBI, and the negative income tax. Every single one of these aims to lift people out of poverty, but as you'll see, they all come with their own inherent trade-offs.
Let's look at the first one, means-tested benefits. These are payments targeted directly at folks whose incomes fall below a certain level. Sounds perfectly equitable, right? But it often triggers a massive unintended consequence known as the poverty trap. If the income threshold is set too low and the benefits are relatively generous, an individual might actually become financially worse off by taking a job. Let's walk through it. Imagine you're offered extra hours at work that give you a raise of $50 a week. Awesome. But wait, because your income just crossed a strict government threshold, you instantly lose $100 a week in housing and food benefits. Mathematically, you are being punished for working hard. The system accidentally creates a powerful financial disincentive to work.
To avoid that trap entirely, governments sometimes use universal benefits, which go to everyone regardless of their wealth. We saw a really extreme version of this recently with the COVID-19 pandemic. Governments engaged in what economists call helicopter money, just dropping cash straight into the economy. Hong Kong gave 10,000 Hong Kong dollars to every resident. The US sent out $1,200 stimulus checks. Because they're universal, they completely eliminate the disincentive to work. Nobody loses their benefits for working. But the huge trade-off here is the sheer inefficient cost of it. A massive portion of that money ends up going directly to wealthy people who haven't lost their jobs and literally don't need the financial help at all.
Let's move to and see how this builds into an elegant, albeit highly theoretical, alternative: the negative income tax. Imagine a system with a flat tax rate, say 25%, and a set threshold, let's just say $20,000. If you earn exactly $20,000, you pay zero tax. If you earn over that, you pay 25% on the extra. But here is the absolute genius part. If you earn less than $20,000, the government actually pays you the difference. If you earn absolutely nothing, you get a positive payout from the government. It's designed to guarantee a basic standard of living while always maintaining an incentive to work, because every single dollar you earn yourself still leaves you mathematically better off. Now, while it's mathematically beautiful on paper, there are virtually no practical examples of it working perfectly yet, just due to the massive complexities of funding and implementing it on a national scale.
So the crucial point here is that economics isn't just about cold numbers on a spreadsheet. It's a social science. Every tax rate, every benefit threshold, and every efficiency measure has a profound impact on real human lives. Whether it's the sheer shock of demonetization in India or the daily struggle to buy clean water in Karachi, these policies absolutely shape our world. I'll leave you with this final thought.
How does reflecting on these deep social matters change your understanding of the economic systems that govern our daily lives? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.